Awesome. Good evening, everyone. Today we're going to be talking about Office 365. I'm not going super deep into the subject, more of a broad grasp of the product, users, groups, licensing, things like that. So we're going to get started here in just a minute. I just wanted to announce what's going to be happening next month. There's a friend of Jake's that's going to be going over pester testing, so environment testing, things before you actually get into like a production environment, so you're able to test before you release. So that'll be a topic that we're going to be going over next month. So we're going to get right in here. Some assumed knowledge at the start. You know Active Directory and DNS. Both are very critical pieces for Office 365 to function properly. Active Directory, most enterprises are going to have some type of on-prem presence, and then they want to sync that to Azure AD in the cloud for Office 365. And then DNS to make all those named connections for it to function correctly. When you're thinking about Office 365, you're like, how do I get started? So to get started, you'll be creating an Office 365 tenant, whether you're creating it yourself or doing it through some type of partnership program. It'd be really for you to decide. If you're looking at a partner, there's a list of partners that Microsoft has preferred that will help you kind of get started with this. But for the techie people, you can get an account created and kind of mess around yourself. So to do that, you'd go to signup.microsoft.com, and when you're looking to create your tenant, you really want to have a domain figured out so that you're kind of getting prepared to create the account. And then determining license, whether you want to do some business license or enterprise license. There's different feature sets for each. Once you have your tenant configured, there's a global admin center. It's really your one-stop shop for all your administrative functions. Azure AD, SharePoint, Exchange, Skype for Business, and a lot of other features that they have to offer. Kind of get in there and see what those look like. The way you're going to access that is portal.office.com. And then the other link here is the way to connect into PowerShell, with PowerShell into all those functions. So connecting into Exchange Online, SharePoint Online, Azure AD, and then MSOL for all your administrative functions for users, groups, applying licenses, things of that nature. Now you're ready to really configure your domain. So you're going to log into that portal site. You're going to go into admin, setups, domains, and verify your domain. So this is kind of where the DNS piece of it comes in, where you're going to be configuring that domain with different text records to validate that you own the domain, and then MX records for your Exchange, different SIPs records for link, things like that. Then you can either enter those records in manually, I'll show you where those are located, or you can do the automated way, which is really logging in depending on where your provider is, like GoDaddy, Register, or something like that, where you will log in with your credentials and it will auto-populate all those DNS records for you and then validate that you truly own the domain. To really get started, you can create your users in the cloud, or you can synchronize, like I was saying, your on-premise AD to Office 365. And there's a couple different ways to go about this. The tool you're going to be using is a tool called Azure AD Connect. And then you can either do an express method, which a lot of small businesses would probably do. They don't have a lot of custom stuff. They're starting out fresh. So you can just go express, configure auto updates, and Azure AD Connect will just auto update itself and sync your users in the cloud, and you don't have to worry about it too much. Other install method is a customized way where you can tie in SQL for high availability and better performance, creating service accounts and linking service accounts to your Azure AD service, so you're not running it with like just a generic or a regular user account. And then there's different sync methods as well. I'm going to be showing the tool off a little bit today as well. Creating cloud users, you can either do this manually through the portal GUI or with PowerShell, and you can do that either connecting into the MSOL service or Azure AD itself, which is provisioning into Azure AD. Synchronizing your on-premise groups, very similar to how you're doing your users. It's the exact same process. So we'll show you what that looks like. And for a lot of these different scenarios, especially if you have an Azure AD in the cloud already, there's different tools that you can use to validate that your data that you'd be syncing to the cloud isn't going to erase what you have there. So there's tools I will show you what that looks like. Creating cloud groups, very similar to creating users, running your different PowerShell commands, or using the GUI. A lot of it, at least in enterprise, is going to be automated, so you're going to be connecting into your different PowerShell hooks for that. The tool I was just talking about was the CS export and CS analyzer. So what this will do is it'll export your different connector spaces, the objects that exist in there, and then compare it to what you have in the cloud. So if there's going to be a lot of deletes, you probably want to analyze that data to see how you can correct that before actually running an export to Azure AD that would wipe out your environment in the cloud. And then configuring licensing. The way that this will be done, you can do it on a per user basis, and they have a cool feature right now in preview mode. I don't exactly know when it was released, but you're able to, with enterprise level licensing, you can assign your E3, E5, enterprise level licensing to a group, and then members of that group will get licensed as they get synced to the cloud. So I'll show you what that looks like in Azure AD. It's a new feature in the licensing section. So PowerShell is going to be able to be used to manage all your user objects, group objects, computer objects, Exchange Online, SharePoint, and then security and compliance. So if you wanted to do like a search and destroy, you can do that, or just regular mailbox searches like you do in on-prem Exchange today. And they're adding features to this all the time. So there's always something new to learn about this product for sure. So what we're going to do now is kind of jump in and take a look at some of these features. And what I'm using here is a VirtualBox with Server 2016 version 5 of PowerShell. Yep. All right. So stop that. Don't want that to go on forever. Some of the links that I referenced earlier, these will be all the different ways that you can connect into the different hooks for Exchange Online, security and compliance, Skype for Business, SharePoint Online. These files will be available on GitHub, so you can kind of analyze and digest them later. But what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be loading a credentials variable here with my cloud account from Microsoft. And what I'll be able to do is use this credential variable throughout my session here to connect into the different resources. All right. So primarily, what I'm most familiar with is the MSOL service, creating users with that. The Azure AD is relatively new for connecting into the Azure Active Directory environment to create and manage objects in that realm. Yep. If you can see this now a little better. The server, I may have to blow this up a little bit, but hopefully it's not too bad. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be connecting into MSOL Online. And what this will do is it'll get us connected into, well, if I type in my correct username and password. Hopefully this works. get connected into Office 365. Oh my gosh. If the credential variable doesn't work, you can always do it manually. Oh, that's why. I'm not logging in with an on-Microsoft account. So generally when you're connecting into these services, I'm used to connecting in with my on-Microsoft ID. In this environment, I'm connecting in with my regular domain. The reason why you would want to use the on-Microsoft ID is really to do your administrative functions. So if you have your domain's federated, they won't, let's say that federated service goes down, you wouldn't be able to log in with your federated domain because it wouldn't be able to hit the on-prem environment. So your on-Microsoft ID is really your backdoor into the kingdom. So that's why you'd want to use your on-Microsoft ID. So what I'm doing right now isn't necessarily best practice, but it's the way that I'm connecting into this test environment here. So once we get connected, won't error out on bad username and password, and I'm just going to make sure that I can see my environment. So I have a couple different objects up there right now. You can run get MSO user, very similar to get AD user. There's obviously different attributes for these objects in Office 365, but it's very similar type commands. And then you can run regular PowerShell functions with these commandlets as well. I'm not going to be going into the different SharePoint, Exchange Online, and whatnot, but this is how you'd get connected into those services. And then you can run get commands and then the modules for those different services, and then see what commandlets are available for you when you're connected for different management features. So the commands here are really just how to install the modules. I installed these prior to coming in today. So if you wanted to, if you have PS PowerShell Gallery installed in your system, you can run install module, and then you can call the modules that you want to install. So the module that I have installed today is the MS Online module. So you can run install module. It'll prompt you for some different security warnings that it's a PowerShell Gallery unsecured source. It's okay. You can accept it. It's Microsoft. And then to get the commands for these modules, you can run get command, and then the module that you had just installed, which is a long list of stuff. What I'm going to be going through today is creating cloud users and cloud groups with those, and then creating on-prem users and on-prem groups, and then showing you how to synchronize those objects to the cloud. So I'm going to be using a function that Jake had shared with us during his presentation to do a mass creation of users on-prem, and then we're going to get those synchronized into Office 365. I'm going to be running the sync later in the demonstration to show you the CS export and analyzer to show you the ads that are going to be occurring when the export actually takes place to Office 365. So what we're going to do here, change directory to documents. All right, so we're on this. And this created 3 users for me, all with the mmdesigntech.com domain. So when I synchronize these users, if I didn't have the mmdesigntech domain verified, they wouldn't get created in the cloud correctly. So backtracking just a little bit here, I'm going to show you what the portal site looks like, and then how we verify a domain so that when we do synchronize these users up with the proper UPN, they're matched in Azure AD, and then they show up as synced objects with the correct UPN information. And then with that, if you have federated domains, you'll be able to then start logging in with those accounts. And then if you don't have federated domains, you'd either need to do a password sync or some type of pass-through authentication so that your cloud users would be able to authenticate against your on-prem AD so that everything's managed on-prem as opposed to being in the cloud. So if we go here, we'll be going to portal.office.com. And I'm already logged in. You'd come to the admin center. I went a little quick there, but when you're logging in the first time, you'll be presented with a bunch of tiles. Depending on your licensing, you'd have different Office products like Word, Excel, Outlook, OneNote, things like that. And then if you're an admin, you'll have an admin tile. And the admin tile is where you're going to be going to manage all those resources. So the actual admin center will show you what you have access to. So I have a couple different trial licenses on this tenant. So I have Azure Advanced Threat Protection, and then a lot of other different security features that are available through Office 365, Azure Active Directory, Exchange, SharePoint, things like that. So what you'd be coming in here for is accessing the domains. So this is going to be how you verify a domain that you own it, so that when you want to sync your users to Office 365, they're synced up properly. So you'd be coming into domains. You would add a domain here. I already have one added. And then what you'll be doing is when you click add, you'll be presented with adding a domain, verifying the domain, and then setting up your online services. So as you can see, I've already added domain, verified it and whatnot. But the automated way I was telling you is that they'll actually add the DNS records for you. So if I hit next here, my domain is through GoDaddy. It'll prompt me for my user customer ID and password. Type that in. It'll enter all the records in your DNS zone file for you for that domain, and then verify the domain for you. And then it kind of just self-service, or just fill in all your text records, MX records, all of the needed DNS records to actually verify your domain.
Are
And then
there any disadvantages to managing it yourself?
No, not at all. In an enterprise level, you're going to want to probably manage it yourself. You don't want to have it just log into your account and making changes to zone files potentially that you don't want it touching. So if you're definitely in an enterprise, you definitely want to add those records yourself. And if to do that, you just say, I prefer to add my records myself, and then hit next through the prompts, and then the records will be available for you at this page, and then you can share them with the resources that you may need to share them with. So depending on your organization, you may have a team that manages your DNS. You would generate these records within Office 365, provide those records to that team, and then you'd be able to come in here once they're added and verify that domain. So to get the records, if you're going to add them manually, you're going to be going into the actual domain that's added, and then there's going to be an export option to dump all these records out, and you can just email them, or you can just copy and paste them. So you have your MX records for Exchange Online, Skype for Business, and then there's going to be records for the text to actually verify your domain, which I'm not seeing here. But that might be because I already have it verified. But those records will all show up here. All right, back to demonstration. So what we're going to do next, I'm going to come back to the on-prem users I just created. I'm going to show you how we would create a cloud user. So what I had run earlier was the get command on my MSOL module. So what we have here in that module is a new MSOL user, and we can create a user based on that module, or commandlet rather. So we can run this, and this will create a cloud user for me. See that it did that. When you do this, you can choose a password or just have it auto-generated for you. If you're doing this in bulk, you can export that to a CSV and share it with the people that need that information. So now I can do a get MSOL user and see that the user object I created is there, the cloud user 2. Next, I'm going to create a group in the cloud. And that would be run with the new MSOL group. And what I'd be using this group for, you can use it to apply permissions in SharePoint, the group-based licensing I was talking about, and then other items where you'd want to apply security groups within Office 365. So we can see we created that group. And then all of this stuff can be automated. So like you're seeing all these commandlets, you can run a couple different script files if you want to do this in bulk. These examples are very straightforward and simple, just creating single objects, manipulating those single objects. The next option is adding users to those groups. And the way that this works is it actually goes off of object ID. So the group object ID and then the actual user object ID. And you can write scripts to pull out these IDs so that when you run this in bulk, you're hitting your specific users and then their object IDs. So it's not like you're able to just provide it the UPN or the fully qualified. You actually have to provide it the object ID, unfortunately, for this. But it is fairly easy to write a script to pull the object ID out to add. So with this command, I do actually have to change the object ID because I had this written for something else. So this command, I'm going to need the group object ID, which we have here. If you didn't have your object ID, you can run get MSOL group, and then you can select your actual group you want, and then it has the object ID next to it. And you can do a where filter if you're not sure what, if there's like a huge list of groups, you can do a where filter, use a like parameter, and then find the group you're looking for, and then select the object ID that way. So my group object ID is going to be this. And then my user object ID is going to be for that one MSOL user I created. I'm actually just going to run the user principal name. So I'm going to expand this object out and then grab that object ID for this user. So now if I run this command, it should add the user, the cloud user 2 to the E3 users 2 group. And I'm going to be using on-prem users and groups for the demonstration for the Office 365 based licensing. But now we can see that we have added that user to that group. And then to get membership of groups, it's going to be get MSOL group member, which is very similar to your AD group members if you're familiar with the Active Directory module on-prem. So we can run this to get actual group membership. And it shows that I have a user added to that group. And then I had shown you this earlier. This just grabs all of the groups that are in your cloud. The next one, we're going to be creating an on-prem AD group, and this will be the group that I'm actually going to use in Office 365 to license users with an E3 license. So with the group-based licensing, it is specific to enterprise. So you wouldn't be able to use it with Business Premium, for example, if you're looking at that type of licensing. So this really, in my experience, helps the enterprise as opposed to having to bulk license users individually. You're just able to add them to your groups. So if you have a provisioning tool, you just have your provisioning tool, add them to a group, they get synced to Office 365, and then fairly quickly they get licensed with an E3 license. So we're going to run this command to create an on-prem group. And we should have that created now. I'm just going to check my Active Directory here. So I have that group created. The next command I run, I'm going to add some group members. So we can run the add AD group member, which will add the 3 users that I created earlier in the presentation. I think this should, if I have the right users. Oh, did I not have that right? I did not change that. So I had the actual display name not the actual group name. So this one should work. So that's fine. So what we can do to make sure that my members are added, we can do get AD group, member, identity, and then it should be E3 users 1. And that shows that I added those 3 users to that group. So now that I have all my users and groups created, I'm ready to export to Office 365. I can run the synchronization manager tool to export that data into Office 365. So I have that tool open already. I'm actually going to run a manual sync here, excluding the export piece of it so that I can show you the CS export and CS analyzer. So when you're running the synchronization service manager, you have different connectors created within this tool. In those connectors, you can have multiple forests. So if you have, let's say, an Exchange forest and another forest with just user objects, you're able to create your metaverse objects from objects that exist in multiple forests. So you can pull your mail attributes from your Exchange forest, you can pull your user attributes from your user forest, and then marry them in the connector spaces, and then it's called the metaverse. And then when you run that export, it'll actually export those married objects to Azure AD. And then you'll have them as one object in the cloud. But it was a combination of a couple different forests to get that object created. And the way that's done is through the sync rules editor. And that's a little more complex of a tool. It's something that you'll have to kind of dig deep into if you're going to be dealing with multiple forests, because that's going to be how your connector spaces marry those objects together. So what we're going to be running first is imports. So we're going to import our on-prem AD and then our cloud AD. So I'm going to run delta import on our on-prem AD, and then run import on our cloud AD. And what this does is it imports the object in our cloud and our on-prem AD into their corresponding connector spaces. And then we'll run delta syncs here to check for changes. So you'll see that these objects exist on-prem, but not in our cloud connector. And then what it'll do is it'll synchronize those changes and get them ready for export into Azure AD. So the next part will be that synchronization piece that I just discussed. So we'll synchronize the local connector, and then we'll synchronize the cloud connector. And then when the changes occur and you click on the different connectors, you'll actually see what's occurring. So on our local, we can see that we have connector flow updates here, and then projections. And I'm actually going to do one quick thing here because I forgot to do this. But what we're going to do is I'm excluding my group because I wanted to show you how to add additional OUs. So when you install the Synchronization Manager or AD Connect, you're going to go through what I said, the express or customized install. I actually went the customized route with this because I created a service account. And then I also excluded different OUs. So if you're installing this for an enterprise, you don't want to necessarily sync your entire Active Directory up to Office 365. You probably want to synchronize maybe just your users OU or your groups OU. You can filter it down to just synchronize a specific organizational unit. So to do that, if you've already installed it, you can come in here, go to your on-prem connector space, and go to Properties. You're going to configure directory partitions, and you're going to add new containers. So you're going to log in, depending on how you're accessing the environment. You can access it with your service account that you may have created, or if you have the right group memberships, you can use your domain admin account or to access this piece of the connector. So once you've logged in successfully, you're going to see a select containers option. You're going to drill down to the OU you want, select the OU, OK, and OK. So what I did, I just added the groups OU so that my E3 users, one group will also get synchronized with its membership to the cloud now. I'm going to run through the sync one more time. Build port. And depending on your AD size, these imports and exports can take some time. I've worked in environments where there's like 100,000 plus objects. It takes, if you're running a full import export, it can take upwards of 10 hours or so. So depending on your environment size, you can have different types of ways of configuring Azure AD Connect. One of the methodologies that I just helped deploy was a swing type of methodology. So you have two Azure AD Connect servers. One of those servers is always in what they call staging mode. So it's always running imports and synchronizations to keep the metaverse up to date. And then you have an export server, which is doing those same import, synchronization, and exports. And then let's say Microsoft comes out with a new version of AD Connect. Well, I want to update AD Connect without taking down my sync service. So what you can do is you can go to your staging server, update your Azure AD Connect, and run a full import. So when you upgrade Azure AD Connect, you have to run full import and synchronize before exporting to Office 365. So what you can do is you can take your staging box, upgrade that, run your full imports and full syncs, so that 10 plus hours is now 30 minutes to do an upgrade. So you update your staging box, leave your production box alone. Then once you have your staging box upgraded and full import and sync run, you can do what they call the swing. So you're taking your production box, putting it in staging mode, and then taking your swing staging mode box and putting it in production mode, and then begin exporting directly into the cloud. So with this, I should, I'm going to run the syncs. I should see one more add here, and then we'll run the CS export and analyzer to see those changes. Yeah, you can run these through PowerShell. Normally, that's what I would do, but doing manually, I just wanted to show you how you do it the GUI way. When I run the export here, I'll actually run the command to do the sync. So now we have that. I should see another add. All right, I think that's there. If not, I can run the export will catch it. So to use this tool, we're going to be connecting into Azure AD Sync bin, and then the tools are available with the install. So when you install Azure AD Connect, these tools come with it. So we can run the CS export. I have here the connector space that I'm going to be running my export on. So you're going to be running your export on your actual Azure AD connector. And this will change based on your environment. So just make sure that if you're using these commands, you're exporting the correct connector. So it didn't capture my group change, but that's fine. We'll get it in the export. And then CS Analyzer will take this XML file and then put it in a format that we can somewhat understand. And you'll see that here. Drop that on my desktop. I don't have Excel on here, so it's going to just be a big text file. But what we really care about is the rows down here at the end. So we can see that I'm adding 3 objects, but when I run the export here, it's actually going to create a group. So I should see 4, but since I missed that piece, we see 3. So we see the 3 user objects. If you're viewing this in Excel, you see these all as columns, and then the actual work that it's going to be doing. So all of the attributes that the export's going to be putting into Azure AD. So with that, we can run the PowerShell way of doing this. So I'm going to run a delta, and then you can obviously call different policy types, so the sync, import, export, so on and so forth.
That's probably one of the worst named commands I've ever come across. Personally.
The start AD sync cycle?
AD sync cycle.
Yeah. The AD sync cycle. Yeah. So that would be the PowerShell way of running what I had done earlier, except this will actually run the export. So once this finishes, we should see an ad. Why didn't it create my group? We're actually going to run this one more time because it did not see my group. And it may not like. Oh, I know. So I'm going to take a look here just to make sure that it actually took. And if not, I can create another group here quick. So I do have groups selected. I have seen it where it doesn't pick up the objects right away. So if you have to, you can run an initial, so a full import-export. But really, you want to kind of stay away from that as much as possible in an enterprise-level environment. And if you're going to be doing that, you're definitely going to want to be using the CS export and analyzer to verify that your full import-export isn't going to blow away Azure AD. Or at least make significant changes that would cause issues in the environment.
Never happens.
Yeah, that's what backups are for. You can call them late at night and they'll be super upset. All right, let me run this one more time. Not that. Once I get this up there, we'll move on to the licensing piece of it. And that's done through Azure AD. So I'm going to be using the actual GUI console for this piece of it. And that's done through, it's, I believe, Azure. I don't remember the website, but you're connecting into Azure Active Directory portal site to access those features. Let's see here. All right, cool. Should see my group. Yes. All right, great. I don't know why this VirtualBox likes to just minimize this when I open up an actual connector space, but that's okay. We're done with this piece of it anyway. I want to just run a similar command just to make sure that my objects are in the cloud. So we can run get MSWL user group again, and we can see that our E3 users 1 group is up there. And then you can also connect into the portal.office.com and go to the user management and go to active users and then active groups as well. And we should see that we have items synced up here. So you can see the 3 users that I created, the G, H, and I, all have been synced to Office 365. And then for groups, we should see a synchronized group as well for the E1 users. And then that group should have those 3 users that I created as members, which we see here. So next, we can come into Azure Active Directory, which is aad.portal.azure.com. So that if you wanted to go directly to the site, you can log in there. So we come into Azure Active Directory. You can go to licenses, and then you go to your products. Select your license, and then license groups, and you're going to assign that. So you can select individual users, all of which can be done through PowerShell. I've got a couple different commands for that, or you can assign it to a group. So the group that I want to assign is the E3 users one. So in just a moment, we should see the actual users when this takes effect that my E3 will have 3 licensed users with that subscription. Really, what we were trying to get out of this today was a broad type of environment overview of Office 365, and then we'll be able to dive deeper into the other features later down the road, like SharePoint, Exchange, and other products that Microsoft has out there. So I hope you got a little bit out of this presentation and the different ways of creating groups, users, synchronizing those objects into the Azure AD environment. So let's go back into this one fairly quick the last time. So we should see, yep, so we see that the 3 users that are a member of that group are now licensed with E3. And then it takes a little bit on Microsoft's end to provision the users with the license, but it tends to provision fairly quick. So this is a feature that's in preview mode right now. They've been talking about this, I believe, at the beginning of the year. When they were talking about it, it wasn't in even preview mode yet. They were just talking about it.
I heard about it last
So,
summer.
yeah, so it's been something that's been in the works. And it's available now, and at least I know a couple of different enterprises are using it. Kind of like it's Microsoft. They have a lot of different products out there they're always testing with their end users. So that's what, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, test in production.
Yep.
Microsoft.
Yeah, Windows updates, exactly. So that's what I have prepared today.
I was going to say, because one thing that the thing that you hit there with the group thing,
Yep.
sometimes I found with 365 you have to kind of touch a group or a user to get it to update. You see by the AD sync tool, because you'll be like, oh, why isn't it syncing? You just go in there, you change an attribute, save it, and all of a sudden it'll appear.
Right, there's some difference now.
Yeah.
I've seen the same thing.
So if you ever encounter that, yeah, just touch it.
There's a lot of oddities that you'll run into with this. Some common errors that you'll see was like federated users. So if you're dealing with a domain with a lot of different federated domains, you'll get some federated domain user error. So I don't know if you want to call it a bug or just an issue with the product right now, is you are unable to switch federated UPN to another federated UPN with Azure AD. You actually have to switch your cloud object to an unfederated domain before the sync will actually take effect and update the user's UPN from your on-prem environment to your cloud environment. And then the actual tool that they have in the cloud to export those errors actually just exports the new value. So if you wanted to do it in bulk, for example, you can't just use that export that you got from the cloud to update all those user objects. So that's another nice tool that I show you, the CS export. You can actually get all of the old values, so all of the current cloud object values, so that you're able to run, I'll use a for each loop as an example, on those old objects, change them to on Microsoft ID, which is an unfederated domain, then run your sync again, and it'll update with the new federated UPN. So there's a couple different quirks that are with this product that you'll kind of just figure out as you go. But there's a lot of good documentation out there on how to correct those type of errors. I actually had to figure that one out myself. I found some different articles, but really I was like, okay, I can use this tool to export all the old data and then use that old data to manipulate all my cloud objects. And then I was able to resolve like 470 sync errors in a matter of minutes as opposed to having to do each one manually. So there's a lot of cool features out there, and then interesting ways to troubleshoot the features when they don't work properly. Yeah. Yeah, it's not generally this smooth when you're deploying an environment, especially if you already have a pre-existing environment. I mean, if you're a startup and you're coming in fresh, it's fairly easy to just hit the ground running with the product like this. But when you have a lot of legacy products, a lot of big environments, you're going to have to be very careful about how you deploy the services. Staging mode is your friend, so before you export anything in Azure AD, if you already have an existing environment, you'll be able to see all those changes prior to them actually hitting your production. But is there any questions?
Get comfortable with knowing how to remote into PowerShell with this, because you'll get into Office 365. You see that a lot with Exchange.
I was
Yep,
just saying,
no, that's exactly.
Yeah.
I hit that a couple years ago with adding resources for rooms. At the time, there was nowhere to do it in the web interface. And that's when I was like, oh, PowerShell, this is scary. And somebody goes, go ahead, do it. What can you do? Because I have to take down the entire tenant. I'm like, oh, sure, no problem. And added a couple conference rooms, permissioned them out. Now, at the job I'm at now, they're like, hey, we need conference rooms. Or hey, can you set the permissions on those? Sure.
Yeah.
And like you're saying, there's a lot of features that you won't see on the GUI that will be exposed through PowerShell.
Yeah.
Question in the back?
So this didn't get mentioned directly tonight, but the other day I had an end user make an Office 365 group because they wanted to share a calendar in a specific way.
Sure.
Without asking if they could share things in the way they wanted to with the public group. So I ended up needing to either blow the group away or just shuffle the VPN for the group onto something else, which I discovered I don't think I can do after it's been created. So fortunately the group is completely empty, but they made a shared mailbox like they would have in the past. I would be, okay, we just dump out a PST and then we know all the stuff that was in there is there.
Correct.
But when I was trying to reproduce that process for a group, there's stuff on SharePoint, I don't even know how the conversations are stored. Do you know how you'd approach, hey, we just need to back this up, because just in case someone needs it a year from now, can you get it into a PST, can you get the data somewhere?
That's a good question. So the group exists in Exchange Online today. There's no membership. You more or less want to see where that group exists in SharePoint Online, Exchange Online. So if you have your group name, I would think you'd be able to run a search on your SharePoint Online, Exchange Online to see where that group's applied. But I mean, it's so dynamic at times that may change, but at least you'll have a historical reference point to see where that group existed in SharePoint and Exchange Online. So when I'm saying that, you have your group name, so you can run in SharePoint Online, it's like get SPO site, and then you can filter your different sites, see what object attributes that object has, and then query for that group name. That's, I think, how I would approach that to try and find where that group is applied potentially in those sites. And you'll have, depending on how big the sites are, you could get a huge list of information. But that's where a filter will come in, where you'd be able to use a where filter and target that specific group, and then the location that that group is applied to. It may or may not make sense, but when you actually get connected into the shell and start running the different get commands, you'll be able to kind of just, say, stumble your way through trying to find out where that group is applied.
Speaking of quirks, it's I wasn't getting any, the org had maybe 5 different Office 365 groups, and get group mailbox was just giving me nothing. I'd do get group mailbox, nothing, get group mailbox filter, asterisk, nothing. It was maybe it was a bad Tuesday for,
Yeah, no kidding.
You had one of those today too, huh?
But you're actually able to select the group in Office 365. You see that it exists.
Yeah, and they've also been
Okay.
changing around how groups work too recently, which is kind of annoying.
Yeah, so they are changing the product all the time. So that's one thing that something may work one day, and then the next day it's, why isn't this working anymore? And
Because
it's,
you didn't read the release notes.
yeah, exactly. gotta read the release. But yeah, for that one, I think that would be an okay approach to try and find where it's applied.
Because a lot
But
of that
really,
group stuff now is stored on the OneDrive.
okay, yeah.
So you might need to go into the OneDrive location and look for that group data in there, because that's where they're moving a lot of that SharePoint data to actually live on the OneDrive.
And then there is the hook that I showed. It should be in here for how to connect in there. But yeah, I mean, if you're not finding it in one spot, OneDrive is stored in SharePoint. So if it's not showing up in SharePoint, you obviously go to OneDrive, which is another connector, unfortunately, but you should be able to find that data as well.
Which I don't know why they're moving SharePoint data over to OneDrive data, but whatever. That's on me.
It's Microsoft. Someone knows something we don't. I don't have the one to connect into OneDrive here, but it should be similar to importing a PS session that's calling that module.
And get used to this, because if you do on-premise Exchange even, the next version is just a copy of a point in time 365.
It'll be nice to know about the Exchange Online PowerShell commands. If you know it in 2013 or 2016, it's going to be basically identical. Some of the ones from 2010 are a little bit different, but not really that much.
Yeah. Yeah, 2019 I don't think will change too much. Well, it'll be the 365 commands for the most part.
You might have different syntax, but it's relatively the same.
But I mean, even
Like MSWell user,
but I mean, even like
like that.
The Exchange management console will become like the 365 console, just for on-prem.
Yep.
2016 is already pretty similar.
Yeah, but that's gonna throw some people for a loop.
The lovely Exchange. Yeah, the 2016.
Yeah, welcome to my environment.
Ah,
They are, it's like, hey, you want to command line this, keyboard guy? Keyboard guys.
keyboard guy.
That's what that's one of my selling points. They give me a hard time, I'm like, oh, it's done, by the way. I'm like, wait, what? Case in point, yesterday, we had 2 users recreated with no group permissions. They couldn't get to resources because nobody gave me a user to copy on the initial hire. So I was like, all right, blank user, here you go. And then, I could have spent half an hour breaking my wrist, clicking, adding groups. I'm like, oh, there's a one-liner for this in GitHub.
Yeah.
Done. Done.
Yep.
Didn't stack the users, just said, run again. And I went, oh, by the way, it's finished. And they look, seriously? I'm like, look, I'm gonna go get a soda. Bye.
So yeah, I know the 2016 Exchange console is this exact
Yeah.
screen here when you're familiar with the GUI, but yeah. Yep. Any other questions? Yep.
Okay, just remembered another one. So the last time I was at a consulting company, we did a lot of intermediate hosting, and we would like split the MX record. We would have the MX record set up so like inside of Exchange, we'll give it a spam filter, then get that to Milwaukee's host an intermediate. In Office 3 Exchange Online, if I'm using a third-party spam filter, where do I, in my MX records, point to like third-party spam filter?
Yep.
How do I set that up inside of Exchange?
So you'd actually, depending on your spam filter, I'm thinking of Proofpoint as a good example. Inside of your spam filter, they'd have where that mail is going to be delivered to, and you just type in your MX record. So the one that you pull from the portal site, you would put that in your spam filter. So external record says your mail is going to the spam filter location, and then spam filter location says, all right, now that I've validated this, you're going to push it over to the actual Exchange environment. So depending on the spam filter, you should be able to use the actual MX record that you pull out of Office 365 within that tool, so that once the mail has been validated or cleared, it'll push the mail to your Exchange environment. And then even if it's not, it would still use that same MX record, but it would send to like a quarantine box or another location that would say, hey, this was caught, and then it would shoot off to like an admin address or something like that. What is, if you don't mind, what is the spam tool?
Yeah, so like we're using Spam Titan. So like,
Okay.
for instance, I want like the goal being that like when internal users send stuff to each other, it still reaches Spam Titan.
Yeah, so you would, for that, you would need to create an internal Exchange connector, and then you would have, I believe, an outbound or inbound rule. So if they're sending out, you would have an outbound rule going to your Spam Titan, and then once it hit your Spam Titan, it will be released to the outside world. So you would actually need to create an Exchange connector for that, and then it would be from your O365 organization to the Spam Titan, and then from the Spam Titan, it will send it out. So you'd need to create an internal connector for that. And that's actually, you'd come into blah, blah, blah here, one sec. I believe it's in Oregon, no, not there, mail flow. And then you have your different connectors, and then you'd create a connector here. And then from your O365 to another destination, and then the other destination is your Spam Titan. Any other questions? All right. With that, enjoy your night, everyone. Thank you.